Okay, imagine for a second that you are a self-described super nerd from the suburbs of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
You've got frizzy hair, you're in the drama club, and your dad, he won't let you watch the Flintstones
Right.
because he thinks it's a cheap ripoff of the Honeymooners.
Which is amazing.
It doesn't exactly sound like the origin story of a Hollywood power player, does it?
Hardly. It sounds more like the setup for, a John Hughes movie where the main character ends up working at the local library for the rest of her life.
Exactly. But this specific nerd, she didn't just grow up to be a comedian. She grew up to become the first female head writer of Saturday Night Live.
A huge deal.
The creator of one of the most critically acclaimed sitcoms in television history, and the youngest ever recipient of the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor.
Yeah. We are, of course, talking about Elizabeth Stamets Tina Fey.
Tina Fey.
A woman who, you could argue, really reshaped the entire landscape of American satire in the 21st century. Yeah. And what I love about this stack of sources we have today, the biographies, the critical essays, all the interviews, is they paint this picture of someone who didn't succeed by changing who she was.
Right.
She succeeded by doubling down on exactly that nerd identity you just mentioned.
Yeah, she didn't become the cool girl. She made the smart girl the one in charge of everything.
She made it the power position.
So our mission today is to really unpack how that happened. We're going to look at the grind of her Chicago years, the pressure cooker of the SNL writers' room.
Oh, absolutely.
That insane moment in 2008 when she basically became Sarah Palin. And we want to get into the specific philosophy behind her comedy.
And we have to talk about the friction in her work, too, because for all the praise, and there was a lot of praise, there's been plenty of debate about her style.
The self-deprecation, for sure.
The self-deprecation, the racial satire, and just, how those jokes have aged over time. It's a complex legacy.
It is. But to understand the empire she built, we have to start at the foundation. So let's go back to Upper Darby Township, Pennsylvania, the 1970s.
A very specific slice of Americana. Tina Fey was born there in 1970. And if you look at her family background, you immediately see where her observational skills come from. She calls herself a mystery ethnic, which is such a classic Fey way to both deflect and describe at the exact same time.
It's a great line. And the reality is this really interesting mix. Her mom, Zenobia Jean Zeneckis.
Great name.
Right. She was born in Greasy Praias, specifically. And her grandmother came over from a village in Laconia all by herself in 1921.
Wow. By herself?
By herself. That's some serious grit right there.
Absolutely. And then you have her father, Donald Fey. He was a Korean War veteran, had this mix of German, English, and Scots-Irish ancestry.
And he worked as a grand proposal writer.
Yeah. And we aren't talking about writing letters for a local bake sale here. This man raised something like, what was it, $500 million?
$500 million for schools and hospitals over his career.
That detail really stuck out to me. Writing grant proposals is incredibly technical work. It's persuasive, it's disciplined.
You have to convince people to part with huge sums of money using just words on a page.
Exactly. You have to wonder if that's where Tina got her respect for the work of writing. Not just the funny part, but the craft.
I think that's a safe bet. There's actually a really touching coda to that relationship. After he passed away, she set up a scholarship in his name at Temple University.
I saw that.
Specifically for veterans studying journalism.
That's incredible. But growing up, the household dynamic was very curated. They weren't just passively consuming media.
Okay, this is my favorite part of her childhood lore. The no Flintstones rule.
It's hilarious, but it's also really instructive. Her dad literally banned the Flintstones from the house.
Because he viewed it as a derivative ripoff of the Honeymooners.
Which, to be fair to Dawn Fey...
It absolutely is. I mean, Fred Flintstone is just Jackie Gleason in a loincloth.
100%. But imagine being 7 years old and having your dad explain the concept of derivative art to you. Most kids are just watching The Dinosaur Crane. Tina Fey is getting a lesson in sitcom structure.
Yeah, it forces you to develop a critical eye before you even know what you're doing. She admits she has a very low level of Flintstones knowledge today.
Which is funny in itself.
But she gained this early education in the classics. They were sneaking in to see Young Frankenstein. They were watching Monty Python and the Marx Brothers. She was learning rhythm and timing from the masters.
Right. She was building the toolkit.
There is, however, a darker element to her childhood that we really have to mention because it comes up in every biography.
The scar.
Yeah, the scar.
It's impossible to ignore because it's physically visible on her left cheek and chin. For a long time, the public just speculated about it. But the story is, it's truly terrifying.
It's awful.
In 1975, when she was just 5 years old, she was playing in her front yard, and a stranger just reached out and slashed her face.
Horrifying. And in an industry like Hollywood, which is so obsessed with physical perfection, having a visible scar is a pretty significant differentiator.
It is, and Fey has discussed this in interviews. She's noted that for a long time she didn't want to talk about it because she didn't want to, seem like she was exploiting it.
Sure.
But she has also reflected on how it might have impacted her personality. When you have something like that on your face, people either stare at you or they deliberately look away.
So it makes you self-conscious.
It can, but it also turns you into an observer. You learn to read people's reactions before they even speak.
That outsider status is basically rocket fuel for a writer. You're watching the world rather than just participating in it.
Absolutely. And she clearly channeled that into her work pretty early on. I mean, she was writing a satirical column called The Colonel in her high school newspaper.
Anonymously, I might add.
The anonymity is key. It's the precursor to the writer's room. You get the thrill of the joke landing without the vulnerability of standing on stage.
Right. She carried that love of writing to the University of Virginia, where she studied playwriting and acting. But, and this is important, she wasn't the star yet. She was the student. The real transformation, the thing that made her Tina Fey.
That happened when she moved to Chicago.
Chicago in the 90s. If you follow comedy at all, you know this is the Mecca. This is where the alchemy happened.
It really was the crucible. She moved there right after college, and the reality wasn't glamorous at all.
Yeah.
She was working the front desk at a YMCA in Evanston just to pay the rent.
Which, let's be honest, is a comedy sketch just waiting to happen. The characters you must see at a YMCA front desk.
Completely. But at night, she was taking classes at the Second City. And we need to stress for you what that actually means. Second City isn't just an improv class.
Not at all.
It is a grueling competitive institution. You are learning to create content instantly, on the spot, in front of a live audience that might be drunk or hostile or both.
It teaches you to fail, and to fail fast, and to get back up and try again 5 seconds later.
Exactly. And it's where she found her tribe. This is where the Tina Fey we know really starts to form, because she meets the people who will define her career.
Specifically, Jeff Richmond.
The pianist who would eventually become her husband and, the composer for all of her shows.
And, of course, Amy Poehler.
Of course. The Fey-Poehler dynamic is just legendary. They started at Improv Olympic together, and looking at the sources, it seems like that friendship was almost like a protective seal. They were two women in a scene that was very, very heavy on testosterone. It was really competitive.
The boys' club. And having that alliance, someone who spoke your language, who could keep up with you beat for beat, that must have given them both the confidence to push harder.
I think so. But interestingly, getting from Chicago to Saturday Night Live wasn't a straight shot for Fey. She didn't get hired as a performer first.
Right. She got in through the side door, the writer's door. In 1997, Adam McKay, who was the head writer at SNL and knew her from Chicago, asked her to submit scripts.
So she submitted them, got hired as a writer, and moved to New York. And this is where the story takes a turn that I think is really revealing about the industry at the time.
Right.
She's in the writer's room, she's killing it with the scripts, but she wants to be on camera. So in 1998, she appears as an extra in a sketch.
And she hated how she looked.
And she did. She saw herself on the monitor and had this realization. She told the New York Times that she was a completely normal weight, but by New York television standards, she didn't fit the mold.
That is such a bleak, pragmatic calculation. I'm funny, I'm smart, but if I want the camera on me, I have to literally shrink.
It is bleak. But it was also a strategic business decision. She treated her appearance as another part of the toolkit she needed to sharpen to get the job she wanted. And, well, it worked.
It did. Once she had the quote-unquote look, combined with the brilliance she already had, the doors started opening. But the biggest door she kicked down wasn't an acting role.
No, it was the promotion, 1999. Adam McKay steps down as head writer.
And Tina Fey becomes the first female head writer in the history of Saturday Night Live.
We cannot overstate this. SNL had been on the air for 25 years at that point.
Right.
It was notorious for its frat house atmosphere. For a woman to not just be in the room, but to run the room. To be the one deciding the rundown at 3 a.m.
That is a monumental shift in the power dynamics of that institution.
And she didn't just keep the seat warm. The critics note that she really revitalized the show. Rolling Stone ranked her as the third most important cast member in history because she, and I quote, slapped the show out of its late 90s coma.
Wow. And a lot of that came down to her specific voice on Weekend Update.
Yeah, she started co-anchoring with Jimmy Fallon in 2000, and if you go back and watch those clips, her delivery is so distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Tucker from Entertainment Weekly called it poison-filled jokes written in long, precisely parsed sentences.
That's the key, precisely parsed. She wasn't doing broad physical comedy. She was doing an intellectual, verbal gymnastics. She had the glasses. She looked like a librarian.
But she cut like a knife.
Exactly. It was that contrast, the sunny countenance, delivering this vicious punchline that you didn't see coming.
And then the dynamic shifted again in 2004 when Fallon left. So Fey brings in her old friend from Chicago,
Amy Poehler.
Amy Poehler, and they become the first all-female anchor team for Weekend Update.
The first time 2 women anchored.
And suddenly the energy wasn't about will they, won't they, sexual tension or the guy interrupting the girl. It was about pure, rapid-fire chemistry.
They function like a single organism. That era of Update is still the gold standard for so many people because it felt like you were just watching 2 brilliant best friends dismantle the week's news.
It was appointment television.
So she conquers SNL. She's the head writer. She's the anchor. The next logical step is, create her own show. This leads us to 30 Rock.
Yes.
But I was surprised to learn that 30 Rock wasn't actually the show she wanted to make initially.
No. In 2002, she pitched a sitcom about a cable news network. She wanted to do a workplace comedy about 24-hour news.
Which would have been great.
It would have been Aaron Sorkin-esque, but funny. But NBC looked at it and said, they passed.
Which is wild in hindsight. So they told her the classic advice, write what you know.
And what she knew was the absolute, utter chaos of Saturday Night Live. So she reworked the concept into a show within a show, and thus Liz Lemon was born.
Liz Lemon, the lemon-swallowing, night cheese-eating, anxious boss. It's clearly an avatar for Fey, but pushed to the absolute extreme.
It's the having it all myth totally deconstructed. Liz Lemon is successful, she's the boss, but her personal life is a complete disaster. She's constantly stressed, and she's basically managing a team of giant egotistical toddlers.
Right.
Fey has said she modeled the performance on Julia Louis-Dreyfus, that kind of frantic, elastic, verbal energy.
The show was a critical darling immediately. I mean, it won the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series 3 years in a row.
3 years. A juggernaut.
But we have to talk about the ratings because they were not great.
They were terrible. The pilot finished 3rd in its time slot. It spent most of its run on the bubble, as they say.
In danger of being canceled.
Constantly. In a different era or on a different network, 30 Rock would have been canceled after 1 season. Easy.
So why did it survive?
It survived because it had prestige. It won the awards, and it attracted a very specific, affluent audience that advertisers loved. It was a critical hit, not a commercial one.
It also survived because it was arguably the best-written show on TV at the time. The jokes per minute ratio was insane.
Oh, you had to watch it twice just to catch all the background gags and the throwaway lines.
It was dense. It respected the audience's intelligence. But looking back at 30 Rock now, specifically through the lens of the 2020s, it's not without baggage. We have to address the controversy.
Right, the blackface episodes.
Yeah. In June 2020, during the height of the protests and the racial reckoning in the U.S., Fey and her collaborator, Robert Carlock, issued a request.
They asked to have several episodes of 30 Rock pulled from all streaming services and syndication because they featured characters in blackface.
This is a really crucial moment in her career arc. You had episodes where Jane Krakowski's character, Jenna Maroney, or John Hamm's character were in race-changing makeup.
And at the time they aired, the argument was that it was satire. It was satirizing blackface, mocking the profound ignorance of the characters who thought it was okay to do that.
It's the meta-joke defense. We're not doing it, we're making fun of people who would do it.
Right. But by 2020, the culture had shifted to say, look, we don't care what the intent was. The imagery itself is harmful and has a painful history.
So Fey released a statement.
She did. She said, as we strive to do the work and do better in regards to race in America, we believe that these episodes are best taken out of circulation.
It's an interesting move because Fey is notoriously anti-apology when it comes to comedy. She usually has a don't whine, just write a better joke attitude. But here, she drew a line and said, okay, this was wrong.
It shows a willingness to evolve, I think, even if it contradicts her general public stance of opting out of apology culture. It creates this complicated legacy where 30 Rock is both a masterpiece of satire and a time capsule of a comedic era that definitely had some major blind spots.
Okay, so while she was keeping 30 Rock alive on pure critical acclaim, she was also becoming Livy Star. And we have to talk about Mean Girls.
The cultural juggernaut. This was 2004. It was her debut screenplay for a feature film,
And she adapted it from Rosalind Wiseman's book, Queen Bees and Wannabes.
which is a nonfiction self-help book for parents. It's not a novel. It has no characters, no plot.
That's the genius of it.
Yeah.
She took a sociology book about teenage girl aggression and overlaid it with her own high school experiences in Upper Darby. She basically treated high school like a David Attenborough nature documentary.
And it worked. It made $129 million worldwide.
The quotes from that movie are part of lexicon now. Stop trying to make fetch happen. You can't sit with us. She doesn't even go here.
It's embedded in the language, and it proves she wasn't just a sketch writer. She could hold a narrative for 90 minutes, and, I mean, she has milked that IP for all it's worth.
For sure. The Broadway musical, the recent movie musical.
It's her Star Wars. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
She also stepped in front of the camera for films like Baby Mama and Date Night. And I completely forgot she was in Megamind.
Her biggest commercial hit, $321 million. She voiced the reporter, Roxanne Ritchie. But generally, her film career has been about showcasing her range, playing the anxious straight woman to Amy Poehler's Chaos, or flipping the script and playing the train wreck herself in Sisters.
I want to circle back to 2008, though, because we cannot do a deep dive on Tina Fey without talking about Sarah Palin.
No, you can't.
It feels like a fever dream now, but that impression changed everything.
It really did. And you have to remember the context. Faye had actually left SNL by then. She was busy doing 30 Rock.
She was gone.
But when Senator John McCain picked Sarah Palin as his running mate, the internet, which was much smaller then, but still loud, just screamed in unison, "It's Tina Fey!" The resemblance was uncanny.
The updo, the glasses, the jawline, it was a perfect match.
So she comes back to SNL, and the brilliance of the impression wasn't just the look, it was the sound. Fey deconstructed Palin's very specific speech patterns, the you betches, the folksy syntax that didn't quite go anywhere, the winks.
The sketch where she appeared with Amy Poehler as Hillary Clinton, I think that's still one of the most watched viral videos in NBC history.
It is. The viewership numbers were astronomical, and the lines completely blurred between the parody and the person.
People still think Sarah Palin actually said, "I can see Russia from my house."
She never said that. Tina Fey said that in a sketch. But the satire was so effective, it literally overwrote reality for millions of people.
It was widely reported at the time that the impression actually damaged Palin's poll numbers.
It defined her in the public imagination before she could define herself. And the acclaim was universal. Fey won an Emmy for it. The Associated Press named her Entertainer of the Year.
Just for that impression.
Just for the impression. Rolling Stone called it the most brilliant move SNL ever made. It was the moment Tina Fey went from being a TV star to a full-blown cultural icon.
So we've covered the career milestones. Now I want to get into the mechanics. Let's look under the hood of the Tina Fey style. We've talked about the intelligence, the precisely parsed sentences, but there's this other pillar of her comedy.
Self-deprecation.
Self-deprecation.
This is the big debate. If you read the criticism about her, there is a deep, deep divide here. Fey's characters, and Fey herself and her public persona, constantly make jokes about being ugly or unlovable or gluttonous or gross. Liz Lemon is constantly being told she has witch undertones or that she's aging like milk.
Right. And on one hand, it's relatable. It's the beautiful, successful woman saying, "Hey, don't worry, I'm a mess too." It makes her seem more approachable.
Exactly. Writers at places like Jezebel have defended it. They argue it's parodying the impossible standards placed on women in media. By pointing out her own supposed flaws before anyone else can, she takes the power away from the bullies. It's a shield.
Okay, but then you have the counter-argument.
The very strong counter-argument. Critics like Kate Harding have argued that it's actually damaging. When a woman who is, by any objective measure, a size 2, wealthy, and conventionally attractive, constantly calls herself a troll, what message does that send to the audience?
It reinforces the idea that no woman is ever good enough.
Precisely. If Tina Fey thinks she's ugly, what hope do the rest of us have?
They can feel a bit like fishing for compliments, or maybe a kind of false modesty.
I think it might stem from that imposter syndrome she's hinted at in the past, or maybe it's just a defense mechanism she learned in those male-dominated writers' rooms.
If I make the joke about myself first, the guys can't use it against me.
Exactly. It's a preemptive strike.
That brings up her book, Bossypants. When that came out in 2011, it was everywhere.
It was a phenomenon. 5 weeks at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it really cemented her public voice. Janet Maslin at the Times compared her to Nora Ephron.
High praise.
It wasn't just, here's some funny stories from my life. It was a philosophy of work and life for a certain kind of woman.
That philosophy seems to be work hard, ignore the haters, and always wear a bra.
Essentially. And speaking of the personal side, she manages to keep her actual life remarkably private for someone so famous.
Yeah, she lives in the Upper West Side with Jeff Richmond and their 2 daughters. They had a Greek Orthodox wedding ceremony. It all seems very normal.
Grounded. Which is maybe why the work is so good. She's not living in a Hollywood bubble.
And she's consistently on the most beautiful lists. People.
Right.
Maxim, which I am sure she just rolls her eyes at, given everything we just discussed.
Oh, absolutely. But she does use that influence. She's a major supporter of charities like Mercy Corps for World Hunger, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. She puts the money where her mouth is.
So bringing this all together, we've gone from the girl sneaking in to see Young Frankenstein to the woman producing multiple shows for Netflix and adapting her own hit movie into a Broadway musical. What is the core deep dive takeaway here?
I think the takeaway is about the triumph of competence. Tina Fey didn't get where she is by just being funny. Lots of people are funny.
Right.
She got there by being a structural engineer of comedy. She understood how the machine worked, whether it was an improv set, a news desk, or a sitcom script, and she learned to build it better than the guys who were running it before her.
She beat the boys club by being the nerd who did all the homework.
Exactly. She balanced that famous snark with an incredible, almost punishing work ethic. She proved that a woman could be the architect of the comedy, not just the decoration in it.
But there's a final thought I want to leave you, our listeners, with. We're in a moment where comedy is changing so fast. What was a perfectly acceptable joke in 2006 gets you canceled in 2026.
It's the provocative question of her career right now. Fey maintains this public philosophy of opting out of apology culture for jokes. She defends the right to write borderline material.
And yet,
she scrubbed her own work when she felt it crossed a line with the blackface episodes. It raises this question: what is the modern responsibility of a satirist?
can you be a fearless truth teller while also self-editing? Is that a contradiction?
Fey is navigating that high wire act in real time, and that tension, that's what makes her so fascinating to watch.
And watching her try to keep her balance is almost as interesting as the jokes themselves.
It really is.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the brain of Tina Fey. Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one.